الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with the fiqh, and we're still in the chapter of al-ghusl, and we stopped at sunan al-ghusl, the recommended acts of the ghusl. And we talked about mujibat al-ghusl, what makes the ghusl wajib, obligatory, and the aghsal al-mustahabba, the recommended acts, or the recommended ghusl. And we talked about wajib al-ghusl, what makes the fard of it. And then after that, he talks about the sunan. Again, the sunan means the mustahabbat, or what's recommended in the context of al-fiqh. So we'll count, inshallah ta'ala, how many is mentioned here from the sunan. And as mentioned again, so sunan, if a person does it, he get rewards. If he doesn't do it, there's no sin, but definitely it's to be done. Person should do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it recommended, made it mustahab. So the first one is at-tasmiyah. At-tasmiyah, which is to say Bismillah. To say Bismillah is from the sunan. We talked about the sunan, right? We finished the sunan. Oh, subhanallah. So makruhat al-ghusl. I'm sorry. So we talked about the sunan. So the next one is makruhat al-ghusl. Makruhat al-ghusl, and makruhat is the plural of makruh. And the makruh is from the 5 ahkam, from the 5 rulings. We said al-makruh is the action that if you leave it, you get rewards. But if you do it, there's no sin. But it's to be avoided, definitely, because it's the last step before the haram. And the makruh becomes permissible if there's a need for it. So that's why it's in a level that is lesser than haram, and it definitely should be avoided to the best of one's ability. So what's makruhat al-ghusl? He says yukrahu fil ghusli. Number 1, al-israfu fil ma'. Al-israf, to use excessiveness of water. And this is makruh. This is something that is disliked. And this is against the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And there's details of how much the Prophet ﷺ used to use the water for a ghusl, which is a sa', like 4 handfuls of water that the Prophet ﷺ would use, or the like of this, for al-ghusl. So the excessiveness is not something that is good, it's makruh. The second one, al-ghuslu fil makan al-najis, to make ghusl in a place that is impure. So a person is standing in a place that is impure. If a person makes the ghusl is valid, counts as ghusl, but it's not something that is recommended, it's makruh actually, as it's mentioned also for wudu. This was also from the makruhat of al-wudu. The first 2, the same thing as from the makruhat, or the things that are disliked in wudu. And the wisdom behind that is, if anyone remember, so that why is it makruh for a person to make ghusl in a place that is impure or najis? To avoid the najasa might, or impurity might come on his body, or the waswas. Person would make or have waswas, did something come onto my body or not? So to avoid this is to be away from it. And as it's going to be mentioned in an-najasa, the majority of the people of knowledge are upon that an-najasa is to be removed, is to stay away from it. It's not something permissible for a person to be dealing with the najasa. The third point, al-iqtisalu bila satirin min ha'itin wa nahwi, to make ghusl without satir, without something to cover the person, like a wall or the like of it. And what's meaning of the cover is that nobody would see him. So to be away, of course, if a person knows that people would see him, whether it's men or women, when he takes a shower making ghusl, this is haram. It's haram for people to see the awra of one another. But what is meant here as makruh is to make ghusl in the openness, basically, bila satir, to take or to make ghusl in the openness without any wall or any room or anything like this. Even if he thinks that there's no one is around, it's still makruh. Becomes haram when he knows that people would see him, like public places or in the gyms or things of that nature. Then this is haram for a person to show his awra. But being in a place open, again, so that we make sure that we understand this point as makruh, not haram. Makruh is to make ghusl in the openness without any cover, even though nobody would be there to see. And why is it makruh? Because it's closer to the haram. What if someone, is there, or someone would see the person? So that's why it's makruh. The next point, الاغتسال في الماء الراكد, to make ghusl in the الماء الراكد. We talked about الماء الدائم, or the standing still water. This is الراكد. الراكد is more into the meaning of the stagnant water, which is water that is not moving. It's been there for a while. So it might be going into the stage of being impure, or it falls into what the meanings of the hadith that we mentioned last time, where the Prophet ﷺ forbade someone to urinate in a standing water, and then he would make ghusl in it. So to avoid the waswas, anything that is, or a small amount of water that is standing there, it is something that is makruh for a person to make ghusl in it. Of course, if it has a smell of najasa or looks like it has najasa, then it's haram for a person. It's not permissible for a person to make ghusl in it. But here, al-ma' al-rakid, just rakid, that means it's not abundance of water. We talked about the pool. It does not fall into this category because this is a huge amount of water and it's running and it keeps on being cleaned and purified. So this is how many things we mentioned here, makruhat? 4. So 4 makruhat, 4 things that is disliked in ghusl. Al-israf, excessiveness, making ghusl in a place that is impure, making ghusl in the openness without any cover, and making ghusl in al-ma' al-rakid, the what the word that they're using in the English translation? Stagnant. And what did they use for the al-ma' al-da'im, if you remember, in the English translation? Anyone remember? It's okay. Standing. Okay. So there's difference, of course, between the standing water versus the stagnant water. Even though the stagnant water, by the way, is not impure, it's pure, even though it's stagnant. Unless you know that there's najasa fell in it, something impure in it. But if not, then it's still in the original status, which is the purity of it. That's why it's only in the level of makruh. The next point, ما يحرم على الجنوب. This is the last مسألة in الغسل. ما يحرم على الجنوب. ما يحرم, what's haram upon the junub. So we talked about what makes the ghusl obligatory. We talked about the recommended types of ghusl, and we talked about the recommended acts within the ghusl that a person makes, and the makruhat, and now what's haram. ما يحرم على الجنوب. يحرم عليه. Number 1, it's haram for a person in state of janaba. State of janaba is the state that ghusl becomes mandatory upon the person to be able to make salah, which is the state that results from intimate relationship, which, as we said, what necessitates al-ghusl, التقاء الختانين, basically the intercourse, or the ejaculation. These types of things makes the person in the state of janaba. So if a person is in state of janaba, then it's haram for him till he make ghusl. Haram for him as-salah. Salah becomes haram. And there's actually implications to this. Of course, nobody would make salah if they are in state of janaba. But if someone is in salah, is in salatul jama'ah, for example, ma'moom, praying behind the imam, and he realized that he is in state of janaba and he forgot to make ghusl, it's haram for him to continue the salah. So, but he's embarrassed. What should he do? As they mentioned in some of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he should do something like to make people think that he is bleeding, for example, or even he walks away, people would understand. Maybe he forgot to make wudu or something like this. But it's haram to continue in salah. What if he's not able to? He is stuck in the middle of thousands of people. He can't move. Right? In that case, he should, with his niyyah, with his intention, he's not making salah anymore. Right? So he's not in salah because it's haram to be in salah while in state of janab. The second one, al-tawaf bil-Ka'b, to make tawaf around the Ka'b while being in state of janaba. This is haram. And with wudu, the majority of the people of knowledge, tawaf is not valid if a person does not have wudu. Majority of the ulama are upon this. matters of necessities or extreme crowdedness, this is a different situation to in different circumstances. But الطواف بالكعبة is exactly salah, as the Prophet ﷺ said that الطواف salah except إلا أن أحل الله عز وجل فيه المنطق. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the only exception is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted for people to speak, but the rulings of the salah is there. So الطواف بالكعبة is haram if a person is in state of janab. Between the Safa and the Marwa, for example, if a person does it, it's valid, right? But here the tawaf tawaf around the Kaaba, it's haram. The next one, مسح المصحف وحمله إلا بغلافه, to touch the mushaf or to carry it, except with the cover of it. So this is again the state of janaba. This is haram for a person to do so, whether to carry the mushaf, whether to touch the mushaf. إلا بغلافه, if something that is a cover, but not the hard cover that we have in the musahif, something that an extra cover that you would put the mushaf in. So you carry it with it, that's fine. Or if it's a necessity, a person would afraid that someone might, take the mushaf or do something bad to it. So in that case, this is a different situation. But this is again in state of janaba. Instead of being not in wudu, still the majority of the ulama are in the opinion that not to carry the mushaf if a person is not in wudu. You can read Quran, but you cannot touch the mushaf if you're not in state of wudu. But we're talking here about janab. Next one, al-julusu bil masjid, to sit in the masjid. To sit in the masjid while in the state of janab. And every word, of course, with the words of the ulama is very precise, meaning that only what's forbidden is for a person to sit in the masjid if he is in state of janab. If a person is passing by the masjid, that's fine. It's okay to pass by the masjid. If someone is in i'tikaf and he becomes in state of janaba, of course he will make ghusl. But according to the madhab Ahmad Hanbal and others, that he can have, it's permissible to sit in the masjid if he makes wudu till he makes ghusl. So, for example, there's a line for the shower, right? And he's in state of janaba and he's making i'tikaf. At least make wudu. It does not change anything, but it lesser the level of al-janaba, he can stay till he makes the ghusl. So al-julus bil masjid, sitting in the masjid. The last point, qira'atul Quran. Even recitation of the Quran, it is not permissible for the one in state of janaba. For the one not in state of wudu, no doubt that a person can read Quran, but without touching the mushaf. The difference here between being in need of wudu versus al-ghusl. So qira'atul Quran, it's forbidden. So الصلاة, طواف بالكعبة, مس المصحف, الجلوس بالمسجد, قراءة القرآن. These 5 things are haram for the person in janaba, and we're not going into the differences of opinions or other things that some of the ulama mentioned. We're going through that only, inshallah ta'ala. And then the next chapter is النجاسات, أحكامها وإزالتها. The chapter of النجاسات, impurities. Any questions so far with what have been mentioned? No. Right. The female in the menses, it is not permissible to touch the mushaf also. But if she's moving it from one place to the other with the cover, yes, she can read, but not to touch the mushaf. النجاسات أحكامها. So النجاسات is the plural of najasa. And he mentioned that أحكامها is to remove it, which is basically to remove the najasa. But how to remove the najasa in some of the najasat or the impurities is going to be mentioned, inshallah ta'ala, with different categories of najasa. First of all, as always, if a person is in state of janaba, it is not permissible to touch the mushaf, and it's not permissible to read from the mushaf. Reading the Quran and touching the Quran is not permissible for the one in janaba. But someone is not in state of wudu, he can read the Quran but not touch the mushaf. And the woman in her menses or after birth bleeding, she can read but without touching the mushaf. So different categories here. Because also the janaba is supposed to be for a short period of time, different than the menses, it takes days.
So for reading, it's any type of recitation, just saying the Quran, or only just from reading?
Any reading, any reciting the Quran. The question is, when any reading from the Quran or any recitation of the Quran, yes, for the person in state of janaba, it is not permissible to read anything from the Quran, Ayatul Kursi before going to sleep, or the last 3 surahs or anything. It is not permissible. What's permissible, some of the ulama, they said, if a person is using part of a verse of the Quran, or saying a verse as a dalil or something like this, different than reciting the Quran. There's some questions here before we get into the chapter of al-najasa. Do you need to make wudu to touch the Quran? Yes, the answer is yes. According to the Jumhur of the ulama, you need to have wudu to touch the Quran. But you can read without touching, or you can read from a book of tafsir, or you can read from a phone or something like this without wudu, no problem. It's the issue with wudu, you have to have wudu to touch the mushaf. But for janaba, no touching and no reading. Can you touch the Quran with gloves on? Yes, you can touch the Quran with gloves on, inshallah. Allahu A'lam. As always, the meanings linguistically and religiously. What is the meaning of al-najasa? Lughatan wa shar'an. Lughatan, linguistically, al-najasa is al-qadhara, as he says, the dirty things, impurities. You can say the word impurity, no problem. ونجس الشيء نجسا قذر, يعني if something is najis, that means it's disgusting, something that is not clean. وتنجس الشيء صار نجسا تلطخ بالقذر. If something becomes تنجس, that means it becomes dirty or becomes impure or something like this. So linguistically, you can say whatever you want. This thing is impure, this thing is not clean, whatever that is. But does it mean that it's najis in the religious meaning? Is it impure in the religious meanings? And religious meanings, meaning the shara, that means the wahy revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came down to state that this matter is impure. That means you have to remove it from your body, from your clothes, from the spot that you pray on, for you to be able to make salah. Because as we said, for the person to be able to make salah, you have to be in state of tahara. And the tahara is taharatul khabath wa taharatul hadath. To be pure from al-khabath. You have to be clean from the impurities, the religious impurity, what's mentioned in the deen as impurity. Your body, the clothing, and the spot that you pray on. And you have to be in state of purification from al-hadath. The hadath is the things that breaks your wudu, whether it's major tahara or minor tahara. So this is linguistically what al-najas means, something that is impure, something that is dirty. Shar'an, religiously, then its definition that has to be bringing all the meanings of what the najasa is in the shar. It says قدر مخصوص يمنع جنسه الصلاة كالبول والدم والخمر. يمنع جنسه الصلاة. It's قدر a specific مخصوص. You would find this word مخصوص is always repeated in the definitions of matters of fiqh because there's details. How much of that thing constitutes the najasa or the impurity? Is it a small portion of it or a big portion of it? So that's why in the definition, you make it as precise as it can be. So it's a measured, specific measure of thing. يمنع جنسه, the like of it would prevent the person from making salah. Like al-bawl, urine, al-dam, blood, and al-khamr, alcohol and wine and things like this. With the details that will come, inshallah ta'ala. So this is قدر مخصوص يمنع جنسه الصلاة. Whatever prevents the person from making salah because there is something called impure that is on one's body or one's clothing or the spot that a person is praying on. أنواع النجاسة. The types of najasa are 2 types. عينية وحكمية. 2 types of najasa. عينية and حكمية. The عينية is when something is physical. That means it's a physical. What did they call it in the English translation? If someone has the English version open, that would be nice so that we can know the words that are used. What is it?
with respect to its food.
Okay. So عينية, they said due to the essence, its essence. Al-ayniyah is basically when something physical, something that is physical, or that means it's in itself najis. Not that it was pure and something happened to it and it become impure. Right? So ayniyah, that means this is najasa ayniyah. No matter what you do to it, if you wash it, if you burn it, I mean, of course, if it's burned, it's gone. But this thing is always going to be impure and it's never going to be purified. You can never purify it. You cannot never put any chemicals on it, any things on it that it becomes something else. If it stays the same, that thing, it becomes, this is al-ayniyah. That means by itself is najis. Hukmiyah, that means the ruling of it, al-hukm, like the ruling of it becomes najis. That means something happened to it. As you would see in the examples, it becomes clear. Al-ayniyah, the first one, al-dhawat, al-najisa, these impure materials or things like al-kalb, for example, the dog. Or what are you going to do with the dog? The dog is najis. Al-khinzir, the pig, is najis. ولا تطهر بغسلها بحال. You cannot clean it no matter how much you wash it, no matter how much clean it is. It's not about the physical cleanliness of it. Religiously, it's najis. That means you have to stay away from it. الكلب والخنزير, this is العينية. الحكمية, النجاسة الطارئة على محل طاهر. You have a pure place and then you have a najasa that falls in it or becomes mixed with it, then that thing becomes najis. Even though originally it wasn't impure, it becomes impure. So therefore, according to this, there are another three categories of najasa based on what is najis versus what's not najis, because there are some types of impurities that it's agreed upon. All the ulama agreed upon that this is impure, this is najis, so this is easy. A second category is mukhtalafun fi najasati. There's differences of opinions among the ulama because the adilla or the dalil maybe is not clear to some or other reasons. And the third one is ma'fuun anhu, that means it's to be overlooked, even though it might be impure, but it's to be overlooked as it's going to be mentioned. The first one, متفق على نجاسته, what's agreed upon that it's najis or impure, الميتة من كل حيوان بري. أما البحري فميتته طاهرة حلال. الميتة, the word الميتة comes from الموت, dead. But الميتة refers to the animal that dies without being slaughtered. So every time we hear the word al-mayta, right, it means the animal that died without being slaughtered properly. And this mayta, either it's mayta or a dead animal that it's permissible for us to eat, but it died without the permissible way, without being slaughtered, like the cattle, basically the cows and the sheep and the goats and the camels. Or it can be mayta, but for something that is not permissible for us to eat. Al-kalb, if a dog, a dead dog is called mayta, but it's haram for us to eat. The same thing with the pig. But there's, of course, differences in some rulings with these different categories of animals. So here, what's agreed upon that it's najis or impure, any mayta from any hayawan or animal that lives on land. So why al-barri, or the one that lives on the land? That means the ones that are in the sea, in the rivers, and the ocean. It's, if it dies without being slaughtered, it's okay to eat. Or it's, I'm sorry, not just okay to eat, it's pure. It's not najis. We're not talking about eating it. So it's about the impurity versus what it's pure. So any animal that is on the land and it died without being slaughtered, whether it's halal or haram, of course. What's haram is very obvious. So a dead pig, a dead cow, a dead donkey, whatever, all of these animals, if it's dead, that means it's najis, it's impure. The second one is الدم المسفوح. الدم المسفوح, the blood, المسفوح, which is mentioned clearly in the verse of the Quran, أو دما مسفوحا. المسفوح is the blood that gushes out when the animal is slaughtered. The first portion of the blood that comes out gushing, not the blood that stays on the meat. So because that, this is part of the meat. But the gushing blood that comes out, this is najis, this is impure. which is وهو الذي يسيل من الحيوان البري أثناء ذبحه. When it's being slaughtered, this gushing blood that comes out first, this is impure. Number 3, لحم الخنزير, the flesh of the الخنزير or the pig, which is very obvious. بول الإنسان, number 4, the urine of the human being. Because there's the urine of other animals, there's details. Okay, so the urine of the human being, this is agreed upon. غائط الإنسان, the feces of the human being, agreed upon that it's impure. المذي is impure, najis. المذي is the fluid that comes as a result of the desire, sexual desire, but it's not al-mani, which is the seminal fluid. Al-madhi is a transparent fluid that is very slight, not much, and it comes when a person is thinking or something of desire, and that's al-madhi. So that breaks the wudu, of course, because anything that comes from the private parts, it breaks the wudu, and it's impure, so it has to be washed. Al-wadi is closer to al-madhi. Al-madhi, al-wadi. Al-wadi is a drop or so, comes after urinating to some people, not everybody, whether it's because of a sickness or someone carries heavy weights or something like this, and it's usually white drop. And that's al-wadi. So this is not everybody has it. Al-wadi, wadi. Now. Not sure what the translation of it also in English. Maybe I should get the English translation. So after that, number 8, لحم ما لا يحل أكله من الحيوان. The meat of what's not permissible to be eaten or consumed from the animals. So the animals that are not permissible for us to eat, the lahm of it, the meat of it is najis. So if it's haram for you to eat, the meat of it is not pure, even if it's slaughtered. And this is of course after it's been slaughtered. The meat of the animals that is not permissible for us to eat. Number 9, ما فصل من حيوان حي كأن يقطع ذراع الشاة مثلا وهي حي. A live animal, we talked about this point before, a live animal that it's halal to eat, a cow for example. They cut off a leg while it's alive. This cut off leg, for example, it's najis, it's impure. Right? Because it was cut off from this animal when it was still alive. If it's cut off the animal after it died and slaughtered in the proper way, of course, you can eat it, it's halal, it's pure. But if it's amputated from the animal when it's alive. Number 10, damul hayd, the blood of menses, is impure, najis. 11, damul nufas, the afterbirth bleeding. And number 12, damul istihada, the blood that comes, and the istihada is the blood that comes not in the time of menses, which is normal blood for the women that her menses is a continuous one, whether it's a continuous one or she can differentiate the different types of blood, but it is the blood that comes down other than the blood of menses, which is al-istihada. This is also impure. So these types, it's agreed upon that it's all impure. The second category, مختلف في نجاسته. The differences of opinions in some of the things here, مختلفة, where there's differences of opinions whether it's impure or not. The first one, بول ما يؤكل لحمه, the urine of what's permissible for us to eat its meat. So the cow's urine, the sheep urine, the goat's urine, the camel's urine. Camel's urine, of course, that's why they said differences of opinions, right? So that means some of the ulama, they said it's impure, it's najis. But the other opinion, right, is that it's pure. One of the evidence, the clear evidence of it, is that the Prophet ﷺ, when he recommended the Uraniyin to drink from the urine of the camel as means of cure for them. So that means it's pure, cannot be impure. And the Prophet ﷺ would tell them to drink from it. So therefore the urine of the animals that are permissible for us to eat, it's pure. And when something is pure, it doesn't mean that you can just deal with it and use it. This is not what it means. It means here that anything that, everything is pure unless proven otherwise. So if something comes into one's body, does he have to wash himself? Of course he should and everything, but if his salah is done, or if he's making even salah, there's no harm because it's pure, it's not najis. So bawl ma yu'kal lahm. When you see the urine of the human beings is najis, agreed upon, and the urine of the animals that we eat its meat, it's not najis according to many of the people of knowledge because of these ahadith. Plus also the Prophet ﷺ permitted the salah fi marabid al-ghanam. He permitted the salah in the places where the goats and sheep they're stationed. So of course, if they're standing in a place, they have all kinds of things in there, urine and feces and so on. And if a person, this is the only place for him to make salah, no problem. But the Prophet ﷺ forbade the praying in marabid al-ibil, in the places where the camels are standing. So the wisdom behind that, some said about the jinn and najasa is different, but it shows, if they are permitted to pray in the places where the ghanam or the goats and sheep are present, that means it's not then najis. So bawl ma yu'kal lahmu, the urine of what the animals that we eat its meat. The second one, rawath ma yu'kal lahm, the feces of the animals that is permissible for us to eat. There's differences of opinions here. Number 3, al-mani. Mani is the seminal fluid. Some said it's impure, but the correct opinion that it's pure because there's no evidence that it's impure, and everything is pure unless proven otherwise. Plus, even the way to clean that, as the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith of Aisha and others, when Aisha, she said she would, if it's yabis, if it's dry, she would rub it, and if it's najis, it will be washed. So al-mani, the seminal fluid, is not najis, meaning religiously. Lu'abul kalb. Lu'abul kalb, the saliva of the dog, he says, مختلف في نجاسته, whether it's impure or not, the saliva of the dog. In Madhab Imam Malik, and when they said that it's not najis, but the outcome or the end result of the ruling is the same, by the way, right? Because some people, they misquote the Madhab Imam Malik in the subject. They think that it's permissible then to have dogs and things like this because it's not najis according to the Madhab of Imam Malik. Imam Malik, rahimahullah, in his Madhab, that washing the utensils as it will come, if the dog licks it, it's still to be done 7 times, the first time with dust. He said that this is amr ta'abbudi, this is a command as a ibadah. We don't know the wisdom behind it. It's not because it's impure, it's just we have to do it that way. Not because it's impure. The majority of the ulama, of course, the jumhur, that it's impure. Of course, du'abul kalb is impure. That's why washing it in such a more intense way shows that it's even more impure than the rest of the najasat, except the pig, of course. But anyway, but there's no such a thing in Madhab Imam Malik that it's permissible to have a dog in the house or to own a dog and things like this, unless it's kalbu mashiya, the dog for the farm or for security or something of that nature. So number 5, al-qay. Al-qay is the throw up, the vomit. I'm sorry, right? The vomit. There's differences of opinions because there's no clear evidence that it's impure. Right? So al-qay, whether it's pure or not, this is the mas'ala here. We're not talking about breaking the wudu or not, breaking the fast or not. We're talking about what's the ruling of najasa. Some said it's impure because it's like the feces and the urine comes from the stomach after it's already been established in the stomach. It's not vomit is when something is already present in the stomach and it's established in there. Different than someone choked or something and something come out from his throat, for example. That's not qay. That's not vomit. So some said it's already been in the system of the human being, so it's like the same rulings as urine and feces. And others said no, there's no evidence of it. There's no evidence, and our evidence is actually that proves otherwise. So this is مختلف فيه, that it means there's difference of opinions in it. Number 6, ميتة ما لا دم له كالنحل والصرصور والبرغوث ونحوه. The ميتة, which again something dead that there's no blood in it, does not have blood, like bees, cockroaches, bugs, things like this. If it's dead flies and things like this, is it impure or not? there's no evidence that it's impure. But he said here there's differences of opinions whether it's pure or not. So these 6 things that are just to know that there are differences of opinions in it. But as we heard, if we take just a simple ruling for now, and then the more the person gains knowledge, the more that he can get more evidences and more clarity in the matter. The first one is, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, is pure, or at least we're taking what's mainly from the madhab Ahmad and others, or the majority of the ulama. 1 and 2 and 3 and 5 and 6. They're all no clear evidence that it's najis, except number 4, which is majority of the ulama, that it's najis, which is the saliva of the dog. But we're having it here as he did not give a ruling, but he said مختلفة في نجاسته. So there's differences of opinions in there. The previous ones, there's no differences of opinions that it's impure. ما يعفى عنه من النجاسات. The third category, what's overlooked, even though it's might be impure, not clean, whatever, but it's overlooked. That means it's not najis, basic. The third category here, some they mention it because of the proportion of it. Like for example, the first one, tinu shawara', it's agreed upon that the mud of the street is not najis. It's pure. There's nothing wrong with it. So a person, if he prays with muds on, there's nothing wrong with that. Even if it's lots of mud, doesn't matter. If it's only mud. Second one, damul yasir, just a small portion of the blood. How much big as a coin or whatever there is, there's no evidence of how small and how big. But just some of the ijtihadat from the ulama, it's something to be known by the urf, by the norm. But what's najis for the blood, from the blood, is the again al-masfuh, the gushing blood. But the normal blood, even if a person is bleeding, that does not break the wudu and it's not impure. Okay, it's overlooked. The hadith with the Sahaba, as Al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah said, as al-Muslimuna yusalluna fi jarahatihim. The Muslimun, referring to the Sahaba, they always, and they have been always, making salah while they're wounded in the battlefields and things like this, and there's no evidence whatsoever that they would make sure that they clean the blood before they would make salah. القيح والصديد من إنسان أو حيوان مأكول اللحم, the pus and the other fluids that comes out from the person other than the blood, these types of things is overlooked. It's not najis. There's no evidence that this is something that is impure. Because of the time, and we need to go through the hadith of the day, even though we have just few points here in the najasa, how to clean it or how to remove it. But we'll stop there, inshallah ta'ala, to take the hadith and then to see the questions, inshallah. So we'll take the hadith and then if you have any questions, inshallah. The hadith of the day is related to this, inshallah, even though it's in the next point, which is cleaning the najasa. Oh, subhanallah. Hadith number. Here's the number. Are you guys waiting for the number of the hadith? Bismillah. I had it, but it skipped to me. 58. Hadith 58. Hadith 58. So we took 57, now 58 this week. Okay, you there? Can you see it? Hadith number 58. Say after me, inshallah. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم طهور إناء أحدكم إذا ولغ فيه الكلب أن يغسله 7 مرات أولاهن بالتراب. طهور إناء أحدكم طهور إناء أحدكم إذا ولغ فيه الكلب أن يغسله 7 مرات أولاهن بالتراب. Here there's a dhamma on the ta, but as we mentioned before, الطهور with the dhamma refers to the action of purification. الطهور refers to the material that which is water basically. So it can work both ways, but basically to purify, to clean. طهور إناء أحدكم. إناء is the utensil. So a plate or something like this. إناء أحدكم. One of yours. أحدكم, yours. So إناء is remember the أنية, the containers, the utensils, plates, and so on. So to clean, to purify the cup or a plate or a utensil of one of you, إذا ولغ فيه الكلب. إذا ولغ فيه الكلب. ولغ, الولوغ is to enter, but here الكلب, the dog, if he licks it with his tongue, right? So if he put his mouth in it, إذا ولغ الكلب, that means if the dog entered with his mouth into this plate, he licked it, he like this. أن يغسله 7 مرات. So how to clean such a plate? That you wash it 7 times. أن يغسله 7 مرات. To wash it 7 times. أولاهن بالتراب. The first one is with التراب, which is dust. So this is a specific way to wash the najasa, the impurity that is specifically from the dogs, not from anything else. So any other impurity, as it will come inshallah ta'ala, how to remove it, just to wash it with water. Except this najasa of the kalb, of the saliva of the dog, that is to be washed 7 times. And it's only in the utensils. If someone is licked by a dog on his pants, for example, he does not wash it 7 times, the first time with dust, just wash it with normal water. It's only a special tathir or a special purification to the containers or utensils or plates or whatever there is, 7 times, the first time of it with the dust, and then it becomes pure according to the hadith. So, and that's whether the dog is owned in a permissible way or not. A person might have a dog for his farm or for security, it doesn't matter. The same thing is the same ruling for every dog. Is it clear? Is it too many things that we said? Yes, dust, I'm sorry, it means dirt, yes. Not the dust that is the light one. So, no.